Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swiz, here to talk about draft leagues, redraft and keeper discussion. It's starting to hit February, so we know a lot of people are starting to get their leagues, their draft leagues into order. People will have their draft days / draft nights coming up. People are trying to sort out their keeper leagues and who to keep. So I'll go through a bit of strategies regarding that, something a little bit different to our normal classic talk. Before we get into that, as always, check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular the YouTube, Spotify, and get in contact with us like a lot of you guys have been doing via Twitter, Supercoach Insider 100. And Swiz26 for me directly. Thank you to everybody who has been getting in touch. Definitely been a very active few days on the old Twitter. All right, so keeper league. So if you go into your dashboard, just to start off, we'll go into a bit of a setup and how they work, and then we'll go from there. On the right-hand side, you'll see my draft league. So it's a little bit annoying. I did put out a tweet regarding the people who do run Supercoach. It'd be a perfect world if we could have 10 leagues, because a few of us are in keeper leagues, which do roll over, and it does stop us the ability to join new leagues. So I've only got one spot left, and that's already taken up to a redraft league, which I recommit to each year. But in a perfect world, if I had more options, I would play a lot more draft leagues. The great thing about drafting, as you're going to see, it doesn't have to be a full season commitment compared to the classic, and it's a good thing to play with your mates. Or even people like, who have a similar interest online that you've got in touch with. So, it does open up a new avenue of Supercoach that I know have been very popular for a long time. So, if you see that tweet out there, like it or comment on it, because the more people that are commenting, the more likely Supercoach might be able to do a change or an update. And you think it would be potentially a pretty easy update to do to add extra leagues for us. So you can see there on the right hand side, I've got my draft leagues, my keeper leagues, and we'll go into one of them. So we'll start off just with the keeper and have a little look at that, and then we'll go into the draft league, setting that up, and then I'll talk some strategy about sort of more redrafts. Okay, so if I click on to our Go League, I'll go into my we'll go the Supercoach Insider keep. No, we'll go to the Sky. So Sky's one I do with the boys at the cricket club. Been doing that for a number of years. We were at AFL Fantasy for 1 year there, and we came back to Supercoach. So pretty well what will happen is you can see there's a pre-draft list that'll come up. So for people who are in a keeper league, you're at that stage where you should have an amount of keepers that you keep each season, and you've got to kind of go through and choose which ones you're going to choose. So the pre-draft there, a lot of them are already owned, so it's kind of useless me having those players. So I can exclude, say, Bont, this guy Keezy, he's definitely not going to drop him. So I just press exclude, he will disappear, and I just can go through that and exclude certain players. Ball magnets, Clayton Oliver, I might keep him there because I don't know what he might do, but let's just say Petrarca's not going to go. Laird, and eventually it'll get down to players which are available this year. So because we play this one in particular is quite a deep league, we have to go a long way down before we get sort of players that are available outside the ones that may be dropped. Now in this league in particular, if I go to the My Keepers tab, you can see there who are the players that I have to decide to keep. So this league's very deep, so we decide to keep 20 players a year. And if I scroll down there's my 20. Now if I can move those players around, so for example, if I think Nick Hind is going to have a really good year and I want to keep him because I want the extra defender, all I can do is just swap him around. It'll automatically update. Nick Hind becomes in my top 20 players. Tom Lynch becomes outside. And if I wanted to drop one of these players straight away now, which I tend to try not to do until up to the draft, because you never know what will happen. What happens if I've got a few players who all got injuries, and then I need to potentially keep one or two of these players. But if I wanted to just drop one of them, I could just press the drop button and they would be added to that list that I had before. For this, it all depends on you kind of how many you're playing on field. So in this particular league, we play quite deep. So you can actually go into the rules and settings, see what your the rules are for your league. So if I flick that across there, and I can see here for the Sky, we play 14 teams, we play 5. in defence and 5 up forward, 7 in the midfield and 1 in the ruck with a 12 bench. Additional flex players, something that I know they've been added. So it's a separate position in itself. We play 30 per team, so we keep 20, and then in this case we redraft 10 each year. So obviously, your McKirches and Harley Reeds will go first in the draft because you're always trying to take those best rookies, and then as it goes on, then you're sort of having a look at some of the players that have been dropped. In this particular league last year, it was the Geelong players that got dropped in, like your Tanner Bruins, the ones that they just sort of picked up. Probably didn't work out so quickly, the players that they were dropped, and the players that were high in the AFL draft who went early definitely did perform for those players. So that's kind of a look at what you're doing for keeper league. So in this one in particular, I'm pretty lucky because I've got like Green, Butters, Dunkley. There is options for some leagues if you have captains, and that's where those players sort of come way more important. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this because in a keeper league, and if you are starting up a brand new keeper draft, you are trying to look for players who are going to be with you long term. Now that depends on how long your league will go for. Some people, I know there was one league I got invited to. They were saying, okay, we're going to do a 3-year commitment. And they pay cash, and everyone paid up for 3 years to make sure they were going to commit. And it sort of made it good because we all knew everybody's involved for that time and sort of drafted accordingly. So instead of sort of drafting rookies in that one where, your young players that might take 3, 4, 5 years to develop kind of useless. So we're all sort of trying to focus on those 22, 23-year-olds became a lot more vital. In something like this, the younger players are much more important. So obviously a couple of years ago, when we first started, I took the likes of Green, Walsh, Butters, knowing because now I'm in that sort of prime position to challenge for a premiership in our league. We have, which is famous from the league, the show, the Sacco. We've got a punishment there for the bottom spot, so we kind of make it a little bit fun too, and just so people can't just completely tank to get their team going. So yeah, if I flick through my team there, you can see I'm trying to keep as a bit of a balance between the forwards and defenders, and then they're the players I'm kind of looking to drop. And there's nothing wrong with trying to take some older guys. I know a couple drafts I was in last year in keepers, some people weren't looking at your Hawkins and your Taylor Walkers and players like that who are over 30, but because you do have to drop players each year, there's no reason why you can't take some of those older players to help balance your list and score some good points in games for you. And it's no different with this one being such a deep league. It's very much like an AFL list. You have your younger players that are going to sit on your bench and develop. You've got your main players going to play each week, and you've got some older guys who are going to head towards retirement, which will then open up spaces for everyone else. A good example of that, of having kind of too many of the right ones, I think it might even be my Supercoach Insider keeper league. So if I get that up for a moment, you'll see here. So in this particular one, we only keep 14 players, I think it is. So there's the list of 14. So now I've got the issue in here where I'm going to have to drop some players that I kind of don't really want to drop. Akers, and Mason Wood, very good last year. Riley O'Brien at the moment is in my drop list because the players I want to kind of keep, because it's the keeper league. Ward, Jimby, McKenzie could be future stars for me. Wanganeen Malira, and then you sort of got Baker, who could potentially be the big breakout year for him at Richmond this year. And then I've got my sort of senior players there, so Lairds, Dunkleys, Newcombs, Warners in the midfield, who hopefully will be still a big part of my midfield for a couple of years there. So I'm trying to balance this team a little bit. I've got a couple of guys who are a bit more senior, but then I've got some younger guys coming through because I have had some success in this league. I know Ben has some success, and now he's sort of going the other route where he's traded out all his better older players to play people who are trying to win premierships and trying to pick up as many draft picks as possible to bring kids in, and he's obviously doing that through our pre-season trade period. So you have all those sort of definite, pretty well guidelines set up in your league, and depending on what your strategy is and where you think you want to be placed, if you you kind of, unless there is a big punishment for finishing last, there's no reason why you couldn't sort of, okay, I'm going to forfeit the first couple of years and try to build a big squad so I can be more successful later. Some people go all out in those first couple of years and then start trying to redraft. It all depends on the people you're playing with. If you know they're going to commit long term, and the people I play in this league, I definitely know are going to commit long term. Even our Supercoach Insider one has been around for a little while. Again, this is my Richmond keeper. Always good. If you're trying to find some leagues and you might not actually have people that you know who are interested, it's good to try to get on some of these forums, start things on there. Another great one for us, like I use the Richmond Footy Club. We've got our group chat, so obviously 12 players in this league, as it says there, and we are pretty keen, been doing this for a number of years too. So again, unfortunately, because of the strength of my squad, like losing Hawkins and Walker, and that's what I was talking about before, picking up senior guys, that's easy. Reece Stanley, the annoying things is like, dropping Wood and Holmes, those sort of players, Florent, because of probably a little bit too strong in my squad, even Ryan Burton, because of the guys I want to kind of keep. Butters, Rosie, naturally, I'm not going to get rid of. Brayshaw, Anderson, Rowell, Parrish. I'm really actually happy with this midfield. I've been sort of playing around and doing some trading for the last few years to, make it sort of my time in this one. So I think there was one other guy I was looking through their midfield, and they're pretty good. And part of sort of, and these long-term keeper leagues, a bit no different to like managing an AFL squad, you're kind of looking at what other players are doing. Like if there's only one or two other really strong league years, you can sort of set yourself up. But then if other players were all sort of strong, like maybe I'd probably trade a couple of these older guys back and try to push back my time to have a crack in a couple of years' time. So keeper leagues, it's all sort of planning on kind of originally who's available and kind of then what strategy you want to go with. So I do prefer the keeper league idea, but I do like kind of balancing. I do like to play a couple of redraft leagues. So that's like every year you pick a brand new team through off draft night. So and they can be really fun too. Some of these drafts can go out a long time. Some of the drafts I do, you do the one night thing or the one day. Sometimes you just do it online. Some of them you get together and, if you can do it over a barbecue, or we had one guy, did ribs for us one night. It was an awesome effort. There, and invite everybody over. Some of these I do, which are slow drafts, so they pretty well set no time limit, and then you just tag the next person in when you're ready to go. So there's plenty of ways to actually do the draft. Now, if I actually go in and now they've got an option here that you can join a mock draft to have a kind of look at which players you want to take. I think it was Draft Doctors that have always had that going on, and you get a couple free ones with them before you have to do a paid subscription. But that's a good way to have a look at sort of what people are thinking about and where orders are going, especially if you are in those redraft leagues. But they do have options for sort of keepers there. Drafting is very big in like the NFL setup of that, and been involved in a couple of that. But yeah, the AFL, it's pretty important. So let's just go if we're going to create a new league, and then we'll talk about some redraft strategy. So I use my same name for everything, Punt Road Legends. I've had a couple of more, vulgar names when it comes to draft, but it's probably hasn't gone down well with some. So then, so the settings that you get here in Draft League, private or public. So I could start a private league here. League name, let's just call it SC Chat. And then it'll give you a 6 code. You can put a bit of a league description. You can put an image in there. You can set the number of teams that are going to be in your league. So you can have 4, you can have up to 20, depending on how many mates and how many people are really interested in playing. The thing is, the more teams you have, probably the less players that you want to pick, because it's going to obviously drag on. The least number, you can probably have more. So a good balance. A lot of do 10 to 12. I'm in a few leagues which are a bit longer, as we saw that 12, a couple of 14. I know we've got a message about a 16 team league, which we're going to answer about soon. But let's just hypothetically say we're in a 12 team league. Now, you can do a quick start, or you can sit there and do Customize My League. You can also browse for open leagues there. So let's maybe just quickly do that and see if there's any leagues available at the moment. And it'll come up here to say if there's any leagues to join. and that's a bit bare at the moment. So that's a bit of a shame. Nobody's got any public leagues going for us, so we'll just go into create our own league. So we've gone to 12 team. Now it gives you a lot of options here in the drop down box, and Supercoach has done a lot of work with the options. So you can have 2 defenders, 2 midfielders, 2 forwards, 1 ruck, and 5 on the bench, and just 12 players to select. So that's a bit of a smaller one, all the way down to a 26 league where you got 5 defenders and forwards, 7 mids, 1 on the bench, and up to 8 players. You've also got the ability to customize your league, which was a new feature they added last year. So you could potentially have, I'm going to have 6 defenders on field. We're going to go as much as, say, 8 midfielders. Let's play a 2 ruck system just to be really random, because that would be awful to play. It's like 2 QB in NFL, but let's do that anyway. Let's also go 6 forwards, and on the bench, we could go 8 players. That's a 30 player. We can actually activate an additional flex player if we want. So 31. So if you're in a 10-man or 12-man league, that's for 10, that's 310. For 12, that's 372 players getting chosen. It's going to obviously take a long time. If you think, even if you had a draft night and it's a minute a pick, if it's 300 players, it's going to take you 5 hours. So something to think about, how many players you're actually going to put in your league, and that really tests the depth. So if you only got 4 players, 4 times 31 there, 124. So it's not going to take that long. Probably going to be 2 hours, and your league's done. But then you can have obviously a little bit deeper, and then you go into continue step 2, and this will really depend on the strategies, and we're going to get into strategy for some league in a second, but I thought I'd point this out because it's really important. When does your league start? Now, they don't give you the option for round 0, so that's out, but you can have any amount of time. So you might decide, let's kick off our league in round 2, and if you've got, say, there, and it'll show you where it's sort of work out. So here it's 18 round season. We might not want 18 rounds. So do we want to skip the buys? Yeah, we do want to skip the buys, and it'll show how that'll look with skipping the buys 12, 13, 14, 15, not the other buys, but it will allow you to skip that. You can do your percentage, or you can do it on just total points. So the difference between that is, if percentage is so what you score and then minus what obviously your opponent scores, where total points is just based on you. So you get your 4 points for your win, but if 2 teams are on the same amount of points, the team that's got the most points throughout the season actually finishes higher. I like that a bit better than percentage, because that's the luck of the draw who you're playing each week. You can choose a finals format, and you want top 8, top 4, depending on how many is in your league. Here you got a head-to-head recommendation, or total points. You'd prefer head-to-head, so you're playing against 3. Number of players scoring over bye rounds. This is a new feature. So here I've put skip buys. So if I put not to skip buys, we can actually choose how many players we want to put in. So like best 18, which is popular, but you could even go say best 17, or let's just go best 12, for example. Custom fixture, you can play your opponents once, twice, or do a custom fixture. So if we said play opponents once, as you can see here, it starts in round 2. We could be finished by round 12, and then it goes into the finals. Now, we're not going to probably do it through the buys. So there, the buys come in, and then it goes there. If we are only in and this is where it's important to be, depending on how many players you have in. So if we end up choosing, say, I've got 6, you got yourself and 5 other mates that want to be in 6-round league. Potentially, you could start the league in round 2 and be actually done. Round 6, finals, and round 9, and there's a short little 7-8 week competition that you've played with your mates, and you don't have to commit the whole AFL season. So that does give you the ability. You might want to say, okay, we can play our opponents twice or 3 times, and that actually takes the whole season. So when do you want the league to end? It's got all those abilities there, depending on how interested you and your friends are, or the people that you want to draft with. We've got the live draft. What date you want to do it? We might want to do it just before the season. So let's go the 28th of Feb. Actually, let's choose, just because we can, the 29th of Feb. Put your time in, and then you want your draft live, snake order. And so we'll get into a couple of these options in a second, what they sort of do, but it does give you some options here. So with the draft being live, that means everybody's obviously got their picks, and with the 60 seconds. So you can actually change this, and you can make it like a whole, as I said, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. You've got the ability to fix that depending on what you want to do. Now, I think I made my league public, so if we make it private again, because that does, I think, allow us to sort of change what we're doing here. And of course, no, it hasn't. It should actually come up and say what we want to do, but I'm actually a bit surprised it hasn't let us do that. Let's just see round 3 and see what happens. But it does give you an option, so you can actually do a draft where the commissioner puts everything in live on one computer. Snake, so that's the obvious option that a lot of people do. So if you get pick, say, 1 and you're in a 10-team draft, pick 10 will have all, then snake around and get pick 11, pick 1, you'll end up getting pick 24. It's usually a fair way to do it. Linear draft is used more for people in keeper leagues. So the team that wins the spoon, they get the first pick every round. And Banzai, there's actually been a bit of research in this. And I know a couple of AFL clubs have done this as a bit of a mock draft leading into the season. And that means the person who gets the last pick in your league also then gets the first pick of round 2 and then the first pick in round 3. That's to be used more when you got captains leagues, because the people who are picking early get a massive advantage because they've got obviously their captains, and you've got the options there if you want to make it a keeper, emergencies, your captains, rolling lockouts. There's plenty of things that you can do with your leagues there. So that's kind of how you set up your league, depending if that's what you want to do. All right, so now let's talk a little bit of strategies here. So I'll just put it up on my team. And so it's sort of the normal setup there, as you can see, like just classic with the field. But how so some of the things in redraft that people like to think about. So I did have a question from Jono. So he's in a 16-team league. Now, the way they do it is they do a I don't know, some sort of draw, and then the players then, depending on where you finished in that draw. So let's just say there's a race. I know we've done this before. There might be a horse race. Everybody gets a horse in the race, and the person who finishes first. Now, in some leagues, that means they'll get pick 1. In other leagues, they'll go, no, you get to pick where you want to go in that draft. So a lot of people will just go, okay, I want pick 1, and then the next person goes pick 2, pick 3. If it's a snake draft, some people then start going, well, actually, I want the last pick because then I want the 2 picks back to back with each other. So in Jono's case, he's said to me he's drawn the 5th option. So most likely the first person's going to take pick 1. So in his draft, that'll mean they'll be taking pick 1, 32 and 33. The next person's probably going to take 2. So that'll be 2, 31 and 34. I would think probably either 3 or 4 will take the last pick, which will be 16, 17, and then it loops back around and goes to 48. So him with pick 5, he's got the option. It's probably going to be either pick 4 or go down the end again and go 15, 18, 47. And this is very normal with a lot of people in drafts. If you've got a 10-person draft and you've got that option and you're picking 3rd, the first person's going to take pick 1, the second person's going to take pick 2. Is it better to take pick 3 and then loop around, which will be pick 18, or is it better to take pick 10 and then loop back and snake around straight away and take pick 11, have the back-to-back picks? And it's always a good interesting discussion. And this is the most important thing if you go into real detail about doing your drafts. So what I've got there is my tier list. So what I do is I rank the players in order for each position. So the defenders, Nick Dacos, I like, and they're on his own little tier there by himself. Then I've got Sicily and Stewart, Ryan, Sinclair, Houston, Young, and so on and so on. Same again, the midfielders. I think Bont and Petrarca are the clear 2 best midfielders. So I've got them in their own tier. Dawson, Merritt, Butters, Gould and Sarong the second, and again. So that's what I start off with, and that's how I kind of do my order and break it up there. From there, I go into a little bit more detail, and this depends on how much time you have and how much detail you want to go in your draft. So for me, I'll do that, and then what I do is I kind of break it up in how would I rate each tier against each other. So I think Dacos is just probably as good as Bont and Petrarca. He might not score as much with that, but the fact he's got defender status. And remember, unlike Classic, I'm not necessarily starting in week 0. So the buys might not have the same effect as it does depending on when your leagues are. So that does come into account. So you need to think about that depending on what your league is doing. So there I am. I've got Dacos up against Bont and Petrarca, and I've also got English and Gore. Now, Rucks is a very interesting thing when it comes to draft because it depends on how many Rucks you are taking, how many people in your league. If you are in a 4-person league, Rucks mean absolutely nothing because you'll get a Ruck. You could probably take a Ruck with your last pick. If you're in a 16 team league like Jono, the Rucks get really thin very quickly. So you actually got to prioritize Rucks. If you're in sort of a 12-person league, a lot of the times I will fade Rucks and sort of try to pick them up later as well. So you kind of got to work out what is the last sort of Ruck you are willing to take, and then that makes that your cutoff point. As a lot of people will still go early on Rucks. I've seen that in a lot of drafts, which is fine because I know some people will wait really late and pick up a good, even somebody, for example, like a Riley O'Brien or a Big O. So they might be the 9th, 10th, 11th best ruck. But if you're only in a 10-person team league, you can pick one of them up late. And everybody's spent, big capital trying to get one of these gun rucks. And, maybe an English or a Gorn, might still score 120. But if you're taking a 120 midfielder, but then later on, they're getting to this point where, oh God, there's only 80-point midfielders left because they've got to fill that midfield spot now. And you've got a ruck there who can still go 90. You're actually ahead of the game. So all those strategies really come into play. So I kind of balance it out. So I've kind of done it a little bit with what Jono sent us with the 16 person. So I've got the top 5, and I think that's kind of where I'd balance off because we know I think Gorn soul rucking, and remember I don't need him to do it for 23 weeks. This league, for example, it looks like it's got a 16 team league, so I need him for 15 weeks. Gorn, can probably get through that himself. So, and I'd have to probably look at some backup later. I've got those 5 on their own tier. The forwards, as much as there's not many forwards, I still don't really want to overpay for one of the forwards. I'd rather just try to get some value later on. That all depends also on what's on your league. So we saw before the options that you had to choose your different midfielders and defenders and how many in each space. So Jono's league is a 5-5-1-5. So forwards and defenders actually have a little bit more weight than midfielders do in this one, where if you're in one where you might have 8 midfielders but only 4 forwards, the midfielders have a way more weight than what the forwards do. So in his, the forwards do have more weight, but at the same time, I think there's enough value later on in some of these forwards that we could look at picking them. So he set up 5-5-1-5 with 4 emergencies and 4 benches. So in total, I think there's, so I worked out there'll be roughly 112 defenders and forwards go in this draft, 128 mids, and then 32 rucks. So you've got to kind of think about that. So I've got my tier list there, and then I go to the next level in breaking up my tier list and actually trying to work out where that would sit in regards to the actual draft. So this is my third format, how I break it down. And now I've got picks 1 to 5. And I think Dacos, Bont, Petrarca, English, and Gorn will go in that. So if you're in Jono's case, set up and go, okay, I've got to choose my spot. I know I've got the 5th option to choose. So if the first 4 people go 1, 2, 3, 4, and he's left with pick 5, with the option to take pick 5, So he's got to think, well, I'm probably going to end up with a Dacos, Bont, Petrarca, English, Gorn. It's not a bad situation there. But then the flip side there, that would mean if he was took pick 5, he would have 28 and 37 on the run home. So going down on my list here, these are the players who should be available between 17 and 29. That's not saying people from this 30 to 46 selection would be chosen, but that's great because that just means there's more people under my ranking system that'll be available there in my third tier. So if you go pick 5 in this case, Jono, you'd be looking at probably taking one of them under my system. Your tiering could be completely different. So pick 28. So you'd probably be still looking at one of these available. Perfect situation would be one of these forwards. But if you were to take, say, a Gorn, let's just say it's Gorn, you'd probably be wanting a midfielder. You'd hope one of these available. If not, you could still pick up a good defender. And then on the reach around, you've got pick 37. So 30 to 46 is going to be still one of these players left. You'd hope that one of them would be one of these midfielders because a lot of people will probably go midfield. And then because it's a 5-5-5 situation, a defender and a forward. So you'd already have the ruck ticked off. You'd have probably a defender, and then you could still potentially pick up an Anderson, a Brayshaw, or a Newcomb like that. Just depending on, like you can't sort of read into what other people are going to take. But if you've kind of got this sort of grouping of players that you'd be happy to take somebody from that group. The flip side to that, if he's given the option where he might want to take the end of the round and the snake. So let's just say nobody takes pick 16/17 and then 48 in this draft, and that's available. So I've got 6 to 16, so I'd expect one of these players from these two groups to be available. So these players will all probably go, and then he'd have to decide, would I be happy to grab one of these players with my pick 16? And again, one of these players might go earlier, which gives him even more options from this grouping that I've got. So you might get down there and go, well, there's a potential that Sarong or Green could be available. That'd be fantastic. Put them in your midfield and then have pick 17 and loop around and go, well, if one of these is also available, you might be able to get a Green with a Jackson or a Green with a Stewart, for example. Or you just go down here and go, okay, well, these guys actually haven't been taken either. So would you be happy to have the back-to-back picks late and go, is my team better having, say, Sarong and potentially Dunkley than it would be having, say, Gorn, and what did we say? It would have been 28. So, it might be Gorn with a Hayden Young. So you might be in a better situation. And so this is just for the first sort of 3 rounds. You kind of want to do this for the first sort of 5-6 rounds. And that'll give you a better idea of sort of what players could be available early. And you kind of do this because you can't win your draft with these early picks because everybody's going to be taking great players, but you can lose your draft. And I absolutely got butchered in last year because unfortunately I had Clayton Oliver, which that hurt a little bit. And a few drafts, like in that sort of pick 4-5, so round 4, round 5, I was taking Brody and Hewitt, who looked like value at the time, but absolutely obviously had stinking years, which really hurt me. So that's, it's all things that you've got to kind of consider when you are doing these redraft leagues. So I hope that they're kind of looking at that, Jono. You've kind of work out what sort of players are in that list, and then from there make that selection where you want to be in the draft, and then you can sort of break it down there. So the same again, if you're in a 10-person draft and we just use the rankings that I've got, let's just say you end up taking pick 10, which means you'll get 10 and 11. Well, you get 2 players from this grouping. And that would be great. Like you could actually potentially, even if Sicily and Stewart's gone, well, yeah, Jackson could be sitting there. If people go heavy on forwards and backmen, well, Dave will pick up 2 midfielders in say a Goulden or a Sarong or Merritt or Dawson. Yeah, you're laughing there because you're going to be coming up against other people who are going to have weaker midfields. There's no real strategy on to go. Do you just load up on mids or go other positions? The great thing is we do know dual position. You're going to have some defenders and forwards open up throughout the season. I usually will try to stream forwards, and being that, so I will pick all my mids and defenders first, and my last sort of 2-3 forwards on the list, I just kind of rotate using the waiver wire. So that's the players that haven't been picked up each week, and I'll kind of have a look at matchups. So for example, a good one last year, you'd have, say, Jamie Cripps was on there a lot from, say, West Coast. He might be playing at North Melbourne. Here's a chance here to get some points, or maybe a Jack Darling, for example, because he's not getting picked up. So I'd be looking at kind of Grant Myers was one that was like there. So I pick him up because he was playing, say, at North Melbourne. So I kind of look at what matchups are coming up, trying to stash a couple of those players on my bench and just rotate those forwards, because there is value later on with some of those forwards, and that's why we're picking them in Supercoach. Try not to pick the hype guys that are in Classic, and there's no reason why, like, here you can see I've got Taylor Walker. Like, someone like him, he's going to get bypassed. Like, you'll actually pick him up later, and might be 5-10 points cheaper than what he's actually listed at, because people will jump on those hype players, and you don't actually need to fall in the trap of it. This is not Classic, this is Draft, completely played different. The last thing is in regards to rucks. So a big one is if you, for example, whatever ruck you end up taking, let's just hypothetically say I end up taking, it might be English. Let's just say first pick, I had pick 3 in the draft, English was there and I took English. You need to at some point later on, and not with one of your early picks because it's not going to be needed, but come to near the end of your draft, say a Rory Lobb will be there, or whoever the backup ruck is, you need to take. And that is what they call, I've absolutely lost the name, not streaming, but handcuffing. So handcuffing, and it's big, again, it's an NFL term. So for example, I'll have a running back, and that running back gets injured. I know the running back who's going to replace him. I just put him in my side because he's going to get the points that week. Obviously, the backup rucks in AFL don't do as well, but at least you know if that player gets an injury that week, the obvious replacement comes in. A great example last year was Briggs, and you had Flynn. So if Briggs was out injured, Flynn was the next one in. Now, Flynn's gone to West Coast, so it's a little bit different there. But in one of these deeper drafts, and you can see with the rucks how bad it kind of fades out, because so you've got the main ones. We've got English, Gawn, Marshall, Grundy, Briggs, Witts, as I've got there, the 6. You had Big O, Riley O'Brien, Darcy Cameron, Cherry's got a bit of an injury at the moment, but at least we know Darcy Jackson there, and then sort of Nank the Tank. That's your like sort of 11 rucks there at the moment. And then after that, there's not a huge lot. Like Hawthorn, do they play Meek? Do they play Reeves? So if you're going to pick up Reeves, you need to get Meek. At least then, depends on which one they play each week. You've got both of them and you just rotate. They're not going to score as well as some of the others, but at least you've got an option. If you're going to go Draper, you need to get Goldstein. And you don't want to run the risk of not having that handcuff there, because if you're trying to get too cute with it and going, okay, I'm going to just pick up, say, Cherry, and then I go pick up a later pick like, let's just say West Coast is going to, actually Port Adelaide's a better one, and they go Soldo, so you have those two. You could be in a situation where a couple of weeks they're actually playing really good matchups, and one's scoring really well on the field and the other one's scoring really well on the bench, which is useless for you. And then what happens is one gets an injury or gets dropped and the other one actually gets dropped at the same time. And then you've actually got to then discard one and try to bring one in the waivers. And a lot of the time there isn't many rucks left. I probably could even have Luke Jackson a little bit higher in those rankings, but I think 6 is fair. I think if I had to order them, I'd probably have Luke Jackson nearly 6. He's somebody I really like because he does give you that forward ruck eligibility. So you could potentially pick up Jackson as a forward with the view that if whatever ruck you picked up late, and that's the only way I'd probably pick up one of these later rucks like a Draper, even like if I was probably going to go take a risk on a Soldo or whatever, because I know I've still got Jackson there that I can pivot in and can take a risk on one of them, but you need to have that backup in your forward line that you can pivot around. Otherwise, if I've got Jackson, I'd be trying to get Darcy within the next sort of 2 or 3 rounds, because I know at least while Darcy's playing, I've got a gun ruck there. And then when he finally goes down, I can handcuff and put Jackson back into that ruck line. So the ruck line can be a very important part of it. And this is why I do never recommend playing a 2 ruck strategy unless you're only playing in a 4 or a 6 team comp, which makes it fairer, because otherwise the rucks get really fade. The last one there is Darcy Cameron. If you take Darcy Cameron, you're going to get him very late. Get Mason Cox, because again, it's the handcuff. So so that's a bit of draft strategy there. And as I said, a lot of people are coming up to their league, so it's there always is a lot to think about when you're doing it. At least, and it depends on how you play. And you might just want to have some fun with it and pick players that you normally don't play. Awesome. So if you need any assistance with that, shout us out. The 3 of us, Ben, myself, and Chris, have played a lot of draft in Supercoach in particular, and even myself in AFL Fantasy over a number of years. So more than happy to try to give you some assistance leading into that. And if you are asking, the main thing is you need to tell us how many teams are in your league. Obviously, if it's a redraft league, so it's a single season, or if it's a keeper, and then what is the breakdown? Again, how many forwards, defenders? Because it's too hard otherwise to give you any advice on what you're doing without those parameters. So I hope that bit of draft talk helps you, and I wish you all the best with your upcoming league nights. Thanks, guys, and we'll talk soon. Bye.